family care, we welcome you to our webinar on fellowship. For those of you joining us for the first time, please know that our programs are recorded. So in case you're unable to stay with us, you can find this program in our library in about a week. Also, as you look down on your computer screen, you may need to mess with the mouse a little bit, you'll see a little Q&A envelope. Feel free to use that to ask questions throughout our discussion. We'll do our best to answer as many of them as possible before the end of the program. A huge thank you to Leadership 100 for sponsoring these webinars and making this possible. Today, we're going to hear about how fellowship may be a missing link to helping our families be connected to the church. I'm pleased to introduce two guests from St. Mary's Greek Orthodox Church in Minneapolis. Sandra Anderson, a retired longtime ministry coordinator for the parish, and Tia Muchulas, who's involved in many ministries at the church, but for this program, the co-founder. Thanks for sharing your time today. Before we get started, full disclosure. I was one of the families involved in this fellowship ministry. About 15 years ago, my husband and I were the parents of preschool and elementary school age children. It was our goal to raise children that would make Christ and the church the foundation of their lives. We were a bit anxious about it because we knew in a flash it would be over. And we wanted to be sure we were doing what was important right now. We casually spoke to parents in our community whose children were in the church as adults. What were they doing? As we talked, we realized that we were doing many of the things that they were doing. Bringing the kids to church, going to church school, praying together at home, talking about our faith, attending church activities. But there was one thing that they were doing that we were not. Getting together with other families from our church outside of the liturgy. In essence, getting together to visit, have dinner, just hang out. We were getting together with some wonderful people from our neighborhood, from the hockey team, from the dance group, but not from our church. It turns out that about this time, Sandra and Tia were preparing to start something new, so we jumped in. 15 years later, I'm here to tell you what meeting in people's homes once a month for over 12 years, what it did for just one of the groups, my group. 8 families, 23 kids. The kids wanted to go to church more because they knew their friends would be there. Non-Orthodox spouses actually got to know and really care about people from their church, causing them to be more active. Convert families finally felt like they belonged and didn't feel like outsiders. And today, 21 of the 23 kids are still actively attending church, many of them as adults. Worth hearing about? Let's do it. Ladies, can you tell us a little bit about why you started this program called Kino Nia? What were some of your goals?
Well, Kinno Nia actually began at the end of a long-term study at St. Mary's in which the parishioners were part of a survey. And in the survey, we found out that everyone, well, many, wanted to grow in their Orthodox faith and they wanted to get to know their fellow parishioners better. So we looked around and we saw a program called Small Faith Communities. We looked into it. And then we thought this might work for us. And so we came up with our own format. And it grew from there. We looked at the demographics for St. Mary's and invited people to join. And it became Kino Nia. Kino Nia being, Kino Nia is communion and it is also community. So that is, or was, and still is the goal for Kino Nia.
Great. So I know there happen to be many different kinds of Kino Nia groups. Can you just tell us a little bit about how the groups, looked at the church?
Mhm. Well, what we did is for us, because we are very big, we're not necessarily what you'd consider in the old days a neighborhood church. Geographically, everybody was all over the place, probably within 20 minutes of the church and farther. So we thought for us it would be better to do it geographically. So we looked at the different zip codes. We actually got a big zip code map, and we looked to see what families were where, and we put a big map out there and had people come and put a pin where they live, so we could see where large communities were, so of our own parishioners, and not even realizing that we live near each other, which was the first thing that we discovered. So what happened is we did this to make it be make the big church smaller and to be more family. And so by doing it geographically, we were hoping that that way we could also be intergenerational. That was the first goal, is so that everybody would be getting together like a family, which would have a yaya and a mother and children, and to know each other and to be together. But we're humans, and we're dynamic, not static. So for some that work to stay just within their groups, but people will hesitate, will automatically start going to their own, what they're comfortable with. So when you're 65, you're not comfortable with having little children constantly running around and you're trying to have a conversation. So they sort of morphed into their own little groups of like an older group, some more middle-aged group, the young families. And today we're going to talk about those young family groups, because that's a really important group. So that's how we started, by going, for us, it was geographically, and it morphed into compatibility.
Great. So tell us a little bit about what a Kino Nia night might look like.
Well, typically with our group, we limit it, well, not limited, but we try to stay within the parameters, like from 7 to 8:30. And we have a prayer, we have the epistle and gospel read, and then uh, personal response questions that are part of our curriculum that we have here, the book that was developed by Rebecca Marley, Growing Faithful Families. So during that time, we have usually quite a lively discussion. And the thing that's wonderful, it is personal response questions. You don't have to be theologically learned to be able to express what the epistle or the gospel is saying to you personally. And that's the beauty of it. And then, of course, at the end, we always, have to have our little social time. So that's a time, actually, we learn even more about each other during that time, don't we? We let our hair down and discuss what we already discussed, and from there on.
Great.
Did
For
you
the for the family groups, how I understand that many of them had dinner.
Yeah.
Maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, a family group would look different because it had a different need. An older person, they're going to take care of themselves, grab something to eat, and go to Kino Nia, knowing they'll have a little treat later. But a family group, most of them, unfortunately, many have worked, and it's the end of the day. So how do I get me and the kids and get us fed and get to Kino Nia? And so to alleviate that, they do dinner and they do potluck, so that the hosts, whose family is hosting at their home, doesn't have to do the whole thing. And so everybody brings something. So already you're sharing and in communion. So you have a dinner, let's say from 5:30 to 6:30, and people can socialize, and the children are there and everyone's together, which is family dinner. And then from 6:30 to 7:30, your group discussion. And then from 7:30 to 8:30, then you have that dessert that you have to eat your dinner to get at the end, if you're a child. But but also because of time commitments, say you're a parent who has a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old and you're going to Kino Nia, you may want to leave after the discussion because you need to get a 2-year-old home, maybe not so much a 5-year-old. But you are also welcome to stay and have, more fellowship, and family time. But that is left up to the family, but it's
not obligatory. It's best, but it does, but you don't have to stay with that. That's the whole thing. This is for their convenience. You're a family and you don't want to be like, you have to do this if you're going to do this. What we do say that you should do, not have to do, but it's best if you really do make this a commitment for your family. That is really important, that we are going to come and we're going to do this together once a month, and this is the time that we're going to do it, when you have those small kids, so that the family, so that you have some consistency, and the children see that consistency. That's important, to have that commitment. It's not necessary, because you also need room for the Holy Spirit in case somebody says, "Gee, I'd like to do that, but I don't know if I can. If I can be part of this group, if I can't come every single time." So you have to, that you work out as, you know, when you get together as a group. But it is best if you can, when you have control of your children, and you can say, you know what, this is what we're doing on Thursday night, and there isn't an argument because it's what you're doing, because you still control the calendar. And that's why it is best to have those families with the little children starting right away, and then they just get used to it, and then they won't book Thursday night because they know, oh, I've got Kino Nia with my family on Thursday night. That's what you want to create.
Great. So let me get this straight. You gather for dinner, a light something to eat where you sit around and visit, and then you have this kind of light Orthodox discussion. What happens with the kids? And maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the theme of that discussion.
Well, I didn't have children
Yeah.
in my group, but we always offer that for people that are having a family group with children. And Sandra and I have been available if they wanted to have us come and do a children's program. Sometimes they do that themselves. Maybe one parent has the children and follows the same theme in another part of the house, and then the adults can have their discussion.
Some people have hired someone to come and watch the little children if they're really little, you know, because you do have to consider, you have your very little ones, and then you have ones who can understand a little bit of a conversation, maybe have one question that they can answer together, so that, you know, when the family comes back together, they can say, what'd you talk about? You know, you want to have that, you know, that line that goes straight through, like, this is what the parents are talking about and this is what the kids. For the older kids, like I've done, made the recommendation in one of our groups, they watch a Be the Bee video after prayers and dinner. They watch a Be the Bee video, and then they can talk about that a little bit and then socialize. So again, your group will decide on that. But you know, it's nice if one person consistently watches the kids, but that's a sacrifice that somebody would have to make and be willing to make, to say, you know, I love the kids and I'm really comfortable with them, I'll stay with the kids. Because we have two groups who do that.
And you're talking about little ones there, because middle school and elementary school age children can participate in a discussion.
Yes.
And typically you use a great tool called Growing Faithful Families by Becky Meyerly. Tell us a little bit about what Becky does in that book and why it's been helpful in your group.
Well, it started out, she was writing curriculum for church school that she was asked to write by Father Pappas at the time he was our priest. And, but she was gearing it towards children. And so what she did is, you know, for instance, this is the 24th Sunday after Pentecost, the 7th Sunday of Luke. And so she has a Bible reading, an epistle and a gospel, and then just some, again, personal reflection questions, so that you're not like, you don't have to theologically know, you know, the answer. You're going to answer it from your heart of like, well, what does that mean to you? You know, what does the prodigal son mean to you? Have you ever felt like the prodigal son? Have you been away? So that you're having a personal reflection on the things that, you know, on Sunday we can't ask the priest if we can talk about the sermon. We have to hear the sermon, the gospel, the epistle, but we don't get to relate to it. So this is a way that we can hear the word of God, and then we can share the word of God with each other, and then we can grow in our faith together, and we can then how can we serve each other? You know, when we're hearing the word of God and we want to serve, like we're doing this seminar, we're serving other families by sharing this information. And then we want to pray together. And so if you're doing this in a community way where these happen to be the mission statement of our church: to hear, pray, grow, serve, and share. And so she built this book to hear the word, share the word, to grow in the word, and to serve the Lord, and to pray together. So she kept that theme throughout the whole church year. And so it's very easy. You don't have to study it. It's all here for you. So nobody has to be the teacher, but you do need a leader who will help, ask the questions and get the conversation going. Make sure that you stop at the time that you need to stop, so that you can, respectful of people's time.
So it sounds like hearing the epistle and the gospel lesson the week, during the week before Sunday has had a real reinforcing effect. So you're really understanding it and using it in your own life, which sounds wonderful. So these programs have happened in people's homes. Can you tell us why that's an advantage? What is meeting in the home, and how does that help?
Well, it's so different when you are in someone's home. I think everyone's more relaxed. Um, I think you really have the feeling that you're family when you're in a family home. And I don't know. I think the relaxation part of it is important, because then, it isn't like when we have these wonderful lectures and retreats and so on, we're talking and sharing our faith there too, but it's more formal. So in this regard, there's more give and take because it's a smaller group. If you say something, someone might react to it and say, well, I don't know, I haven't felt it that way. What do you mean by that? Or this is how I see it. And it brings more richness to the discussion.
I also think being in the home allows the opportunity for people to really open up. And so maybe somebody might have something to say. All of a sudden, someone might just start crying because something really deep is happening in their lives. And you're not going to do that in the church hall on Sunday at coffee hour. But, when you're in a home and you're starting to feel relaxed and you're sharing with people and you're getting to know them a little bit more, you're more inclined to be honest and to say, this is all great, but I'm dying. I need your help. This is what's happening to me. I'm struggling. And you forget about everything that's in this book and you go to that person and you minister to them as a family and support them and uplift them as you would with anyone in your family. That is, being in the home is more conducive to that kind of ministry in my mind. So.
No question. I know many times in our groups that the exact example happened, and it was wonderful. There may have been something about a person we would have never found out if we limited our fellowship to the coffee hour. A lot of someone just got diagnosed with cancer, or something happening with an elderly parent, or maybe even just something happening with one of the children in the group. So that is really an advantage. So you guys have been doing this for 15 years. Can you share some of the just benefits and things that you have seen that would cause you to say that someone might consider doing this in their own church?
Well, I don't know. I just think in our particular group, many of us knew each other. Not everybody, because there are certainly new people in our group that we didn't know. And we are always inviting newcomers to join us, to partake of the group and get to know each other that way. But I think the biggest thing is, no matter how well we know each other in a social atmosphere, when we share our life in Christ, then we see firsthand how the Lord is working in each person's life. And that's pretty amazing, because, everybody doesn't always share that when they're just, in a social situation. So when we're concentrating on what the epistle and the gospel are speaking to us about, and people share what their feelings are about that, how the Lord is leading them, or what with what their thoughts are on, you know, if we're going to say humility during Lent or something, what does that mean? We really get to understand the process that people, our friends, are going through. And it helps each one of us.
I see, I see people, I pay more attention to people. I'm looking, you know, we have a new widow who moves here because her kids are here and they want her to be close to them. So she's new in the church. So she's just as much in need of a new family as anyone could be, or the new family who comes and they need family and, you know, like-minded and stuff. And so I see that happening with Kino Nia, where people grow in relationships of the church, and then they want to be in church. That's the benefits are, you want to be in church. The kids want to be in church because their friends are in church. You know, the parents want to be in church because the other families are in church, and it encouraged us to go have more relationships with each other in Christ. That's the whole thing, is everything is about him. And I see for myself, I know things that kids are doing that I wouldn't know that they were doing. I'm 70 years old. I'm not really in the circle of the 17-year-old, but I am when I'm in his house. You know, so the benefit of learning really about what people are doing and what's concerning them and what's big in their life or not in their life. So we become aware of that by breaking this down into our little families. I see more participation in ministry. Everyone together. We want to be at church. We want to see this church ministry successful because we're part of it. You know, I always say, you know, ministry breeds stewardship. You know, if the church is alive and doing well and the ministries are doing well and people are happy and feeling love for each other, they want more things to do together and to be together. We want to be together in the community that Christ wanted for us. And by having the small groups, we see the benefit of that in the big church, you know, where we all come together.
Wonderful. I know in our group, you know, we had 8 families and they met regularly. You know, as my kids were little, other parents were interested in what they were doing in their lives. I remember my son was running for a student senate or something. He was practicing his speech when one of the parents came. And then that following Sunday, the parent came up to him and said, "How did it go?" Like, for a child to have another parent take interest, you know, it's just reinforcing. Or one of the dads called my littlest Pillow Man. So he'd run up and say, "Hi, Pillow Man." And, you know, I mean, just little kind of reinforcements to what you want to hope as a family.
And I think, yeah. And I think trust, you know, those children trust those other adults that are there. You know, it's like a village. And so sometimes kids are struggling with something and they're not quite ready to go to their parent yet, but they want to talk about it. They now have a bunch of tias and yayas and papus, you know, I don't know, you know, just other adults that they now trust and they know, and they've been in their home and they've eaten together and they know that they're listening to them and care about them, that they might go talk to with sometimes that person who isn't so attached to everything that you're doing. You want that outside person, but not a stranger. So you really do build, you know, the bigger relationship. And
Exactly.
that.
You know, one of, you know, St. Mary's is a large church, and understanding that you all started this to make a large church feel small. Would this work for a small church? One that may be geographically spread out and they don't have as many clumped up in one little area. How would that work?
Well, first of all, when we first looked at small faith communities, one of the things they told us was that you don't need a lot of people. You can start with 5, 6 to 12 people so that there is real meaningful conversation happening. So I don't think the smallness should limit anyone. That is what we're actually doing by going into a Kino Nia group, is we're making the accommodation of having that kind of an experience. So it really doesn't matter if your community is smaller, we're still trying to develop that,
Family.
well, the family feeling, but also that more intimate exchange of what our beliefs are. I mean, yeah, when we make coludia together in the kitchen, we have a great time, but it's not the time that we're going to really express some of our questions about things, or to share our happiness about something that we read that really spoke to us. So these are just special times. Just like anytime you have a really close friend, a good friend, you depend on them in those times when you have something to share. And so it develops that, whether your community is large or small.
Where two or more are gathered.
Got it. Well, we have also learned that Sunday night is kind of a night that for a smaller, where people are spread out in many areas, Sunday night might be a good night to try because people aren't rushing home from work. But really that kind of, it's up to the group. Is that how that works?
Right. And the other thing too is that we haven't talked about yet is that each group is autonomous. I mean, we have the format that we try to follow so that people that are joining Kino Nia know what to expect. But each group then decides what night they're going to meet, where they're going to meet, how they're going to structure the parameters of what they're doing. And the other thing is, like, for instance, in our group, in the winter, we actually meet in the fireside room at church because the home that we usually meet in has an incline and it's slippery. So we meet at church. At the same time, we have the fourth Thursday. The other thing that some groups have done is they've done a project together where they go maybe to Focus and help at Focus, or they go help do a meal at Simpson House or something, and they decide to do this as a group because now they want to reach out and be of help as a group. Even though the church is doing that already, just as a group, they decided to do that. We don't have the mealtime in part of our every month, but before the Nativity Fast and sometimes before the summer, we have a potluck and do it, a couple times a year just for that extra social time together. So
Right.
there's as many ways as there are groups.
That's wonderful. And I know some of the family groups go up to cabin together, or there's a lot of different fun things that happen outside of it. We actually have a question here that I'm going to read to you ladies. Did you experiment with a weekly versus monthly schedule? Do you have breaks built into your schedule so that a participant might be able to commit to a 6-month program and then maybe take a break? And is there ever concern about a participation exhaustion where there's just an ongoing, never-ending program?
Wow, that's more than one question. But
Okay, let's start with the first one about the weekly versus monthly schedule.
I don't think it ever occurred to us because I think everyone is just way too busy to even think about doing something every single week. So we felt that once a month was really doable. That just made more sense. You're more inclined to commit to once a month as opposed to how on earth would you commit to once a week? So no, that never crossed our mind.
Well, but then maybe we should jump in and interject that we do have Bible studies going on. Now that's different from our Kino Nia groups, but St. Mary's has various Bible studies that do operate on a weekly basis.
But in people's homes, we use
home, right?
Right.
I couldn't clean my house that many times first, but
we always said we're cleaning after they leave, not before they came. They had to love us enough to just know that the dust is okay. So the second part of that question was that could someone commit for a while and then step out and take a break?
Well, sure,
of course.
Okay. So that's
personal.
That's an easy one.
Actually, some of the groups, that go on for 7 or 8 years, and then the kids grow up, and then all of a sudden the facilitators' children are going off to look at colleges and so on. It's like, oh my goodness, now I just don't think I can do this. Can someone else take over the group?
Right. And not all the programs have been going on for 12 or 15 years. Some of
No,
them have gone on for 3 or 4. Like
no.
ours stopped after all the kids got too old. So, they do naturally run their course. So, all right, we have another question here. It says, I understand you have 4 Kino Nia groups around the city. We actually have more than that. And there really isn't a right number,
No.
but what is the typical attendance for each group? And do you limit the size of the groups? So ladies, maybe you can tell about like how there are some family groups that limit and how there are some that have more.
Well, the reason for limit is because um, if you want, the whole purpose is to feel smaller in a big, for us, it was to try to have that there's only so many people you can get around the table and have conversation. When you get too big, what happens is then you start separating just naturally. And so then you have the people in the kitchen and you have the people in the base. Do you see what I'm saying? So so you're not all together. So that's the purpose for limit. And if you're so big that you need to limit, it means it's time to start another group, that there's enough people interested that you start another group so that you have more groups so that you can have that intimacy. You lose intimacy if you get too big, because I'm not going to, if I'm not a shy person, I'll tell you everything. But if you're a shy person, and you start getting too big, you are going to close off. You're not going to share.
That's true.
And so that's the purpose for common sense, trying to have a handle on it. What was the other part of the question?
Do we limit the size?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So part of it is
Yeah.
the home size too, the host family, how much they feel comfortable with in their space,
Right. No, that's a great question. That's a great way of looking at it. All right. So ladies, if there was, if people were interested in starting, do we have materials and things that we can share?
Well, yes, we have the materials that we started with. We have Becky's book, and she's reformatting some of it too to accommodate all the groups. So there's definitely things that we can send the communities when they're interested. And Sandra's been our ministries coordinator for years and has spoken to groups already about this. So
Great.
We pretty much have everything that you would want to help you get started, honestly. And I'm willing to walk you through the whole thing. It's, it's only overwhelming because you haven't done it or haven't seen it. But it's really all, we have everything listed of what you might want to do. We have all curriculum that can be sent to you. You just sit down, so there's no studying, there's no preparing.
right.
It's just following, like, take 5 minutes for this and 10 minutes for that, so that you respect people's time and get in. If you say you're from 5 to 7, then be from 5 to 7, so that people can count on that in their because people are scheduled. And so if they can trust that this is something that you do, now if they want to stay longer and the host wants them to stay longer, that's fine. But we want to promise it's from this time to this time, so that people know I can schedule up to this point, because then I'm taking a break because I've got Kino Nia, and I can still be home in time for the kids to do their homework and to get to bed. So we have all that stuff, and are happy to share anything with you.
Yeah,
to
and I
help you
just want to
go.
reiterate, as a facilitator, I never look ahead to see what the epistle and gospel lesson are going to be, because that's just the way I feel as a facilitator. I'm in it as my friends are that we're part of this Kino Nia group, and we look at our sheet for the day, and we're going to turn to this page, and here's where we're going to start. Who wants, we have our prayers. Who's going to read the epistle? Who's going to read the gospel? We'll look through the questions. Okay, ready to go. What do you want to talk about?
Got it. That's great. So we'll include that. We'll include that information when we put it in the archive in a week or so. Another question here. It says, do the older kids and adults discuss things together in these groups, or do they separate conversations between the adults and kids in their own groups within the large group? I'll start with one answer. Since we did it that in our home. We had, my husband managed or facilitated the children, which usually were teens or elementary age school kids. We followed the same questions that the parents asked, but we did it separate. We felt like the kids rather be with the kids, to be truthful, as much as we love to all be together. And then the parents had their time separately. And then we got together at the end for dessert and chit-chatted with everybody. And we had dinner together as a group. So during the discussion, we did separate and do it that way. Do you guys have anything to add on that?
I'm thinking most of the families do that. The kids do want to be together, but we do want them, and when Becky wrote this book, it was for families with church school children, so the questions are appropriate for kids as well.
Actually, I think the sheets went home at the end of Sunday school each Sunday for the families to do with their children. It wasn't the curriculum.
Yeah, it wasn't Kino Nia. This was before Kino Nia, but it just really worked out great for Kino Nia. And she is editing a new Growing Faithful Families book that will include Kino Nia questions. Hopefully that's going to be done this year, soon.
And I don't know, Sandra, we also have another, because we cycle through the 4 weeks of each month as for Kino Nia. So there's 4 different years of study. And then we also have the feast days where we use the icons. So we don't even use this book. And Becky has written up questions for the feast days. So that's another beautiful thing that you can do with Kino Nia, and you can intersperse that, at whatever year that you would like to do that.
Careful what you ask for. You'll get 5 years of curriculum.
So the fact that we can establish the fact that there is plenty of information to talk about, and with a rich history in the Orthodox Church, we know that to be totally true. So thanks, ladies. I hope this was helpful to all of you who tuned in today. Let me take a shot at summing this up. Kino Nia Groups, or meeting in people's homes, have had profound benefits at St. Mary's, and we believe that those benefits can help other Orthodox churches as well. Both kids and adults want to come to church because they have friends there. Converts have had an easier time transitioning to parishes because they feel like they belong. In fact, one of our families said they had never been invited to a wedding or a baptism, and after being a part of the Kino Nia group, they actually had a community who connected them to the church even more. Families make lifelong connections, and parishioners support each other through life's ups and downs. In essence, people are building deep relationships with others and the church. Is it worth trying? We think so. Sandra's email address and materials will be available when the program is archived next week. And if nothing else, decide to do something to connect yourself to other families and at your church. Who knows what kind of difference it will make in 15 years. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.